passage 1? I don't know. I don't really have anything interesting at all to say to introduce passage 1, so let's just dive in. What's the main idea of the passage? Well, what did the author talk about? And she spent, a paragraph outlining this opposing position, the next 2 paragraphs arguing why that position is weak sauce. The point of the passage? Lawyers have this twofold obligation, right? And you might point right to line 20 as an encapsulation of that main point. And then, of course, D just nails that on the head. So, yeah, that's the main point. Lawyers have this twofold obligation. For number 2, how does the author feel about this twofold obligation? And I'm going to go ahead and talk about answer choice A because I know for some reason you guys always like answer choice A. But there's no such thing as a competing responsibility to the court and to society. What we had was a responsibility to the defendant and then a responsibility to the court and society. So, answer choice A is a bunch of nonsense. Not to mention the fact that an obligation is not the sort of thing that enables one to balance. And an obligation, may require that you find a way to balance, but it's not the mechanism for finding a balance. On the other hand, we know for sure it doesn't represent a conflict of interest because we're told that in line 42, the obligation to the court and to society also benefits the defendant. So that twofold obligation works together hand in hand. For number 3, we're not going to add anything. You're never going to add anything. How could you add anything? How could we possibly expect on a standardized test to ask you to add something? So we're just going to restate stuff that we already know. And, in that last paragraph, after a careful analysis of the fact, I'm in line 45, you're convinced of the merits of the case. Just because everybody's entitled to defense doesn't mean you should take every case that's offered. So what do we got? You try the case on its merits, doing your best to provide the best defense honestly, and you take the cases that you can try in that way. So A, defense lawyers should base their cases upon the foundations of honesty, substantive accuracy, and selectivity. Because that's what the author said. Then number 4, how do those legal scholars in the first paragraph feel about the lawyer's role? And we just go back and see what did they say. According to them, in line 15, the lawyer's role is not to express or act on personal opinions. Just act as an advocate. You just say only what the defendant would say. See a diligent representative of the client's position, and it's there in the text, and that's what it has to be. For number 5, how do we relate those early lines to the later lines? And in line 7, we've got those other, people saying lawyers have no right to judge defendants. So lawyers should not be selective and they should not be judgy. They should just do whatever their clients would want them to do. To which the author responds, line 28, lawyers who are convinced their clients are guilty should not try to demonstrate their innocence, which is surely what the client would want them to do. Instead, when lawyers know with certainty a defendant is guilty, it's their duty not to deny this, even if the client denies it. So how does that relate to what we just read? Well, it's the opposite of it, right? First group of people saying, lawyers shouldn't judge, that's for judges to do, and just abdicating all moral responsibility, to which this guy says, no, you still have a positive moral duty to your defendant, but also to the court and to society. You don't just say whatever the defendant wants you to, you say the truth, and don't say that she's not guilty if you know that she is guilty. B, it's the author's opinion opposing another opinion, right? Just what we've described based on what the passage said. For number 6, how would the author feel about a defense attorney who argues that a client is innocent? We just got done talking about this. She would say that if you're in court arguing that a client is innocent, you'd better damn well believe that your client is innocent. She said it in those words. Almost. And that's how we know that A is true. For number 7, the primary purpose of the passage is always to express the main point. So if the main point is to say that lawyers should be mindful of their duty, their twofold obligation, then the primary purpose is to argue that lawyers should be mindful of their twofold obligation. That's 3. There's not 3 folds. Excuse me. Of their twofold obligation. How do we know that the answer is B here? Because that's what the author spends 2 paragraphs doing, right? One whole paragraph telling me how the lawyer's duty is to the court and to society as well as to the defendant, and then another whole paragraph telling me how that duty to the court and society actually works to the benefit of the defendant. Since the passage said it, we know it's the right answer, and that's how that works. And that's this first passage, all these answers. Alright, so in that video I showed you why all the right answers are right. I didn't show you how I read the passage. How I read the passage in such a way that I can anticipate most of the questions I'm going to be asked and the right answers to those questions. I didn't show you how I select which passage to do. I didn't give you a method of dealing with reading comp. That's because I think that's where the value's at. Now, if you agree with me that having a methodological, systematic means of kicking the LSAT where it counts is worth paying for, then check out that link and you can see a list of our current course offerings and prices. And if you don't, that's cool too. Keep making as best use you can of these free videos and tell all your friends how awesome we are. Although if you thought that was awesome, wait till you see what's in the paid course.